great to see you all. Thank you so much. And of course, Prince Harry, we have to start with you. You know, you are behind all of this. It's your inspiration. 10 years on, it's got to feel like a bit of a moment, hasn't it?
Yes, I think it's much more interesting to hear it from Keith's perspective when I called him 10 years ago and he thought he just retired and was hanging up his boots and had less to do, not more to do. But no, it's 10 years is a real thing. It's our birthday at Invictus Games Foundation, and we're all very excited and thrilled. And you know, this really is. Sometimes you can say, you can look back and go, look at what we've done, but also, given the state of the world, there is so much more to do. And I think there's a lot of uncertainty. But what we've created is this global community amongst so many of us with this shared journey of healing, not just for the individuals, but for their families as well. So what started as a little idea, actually stolen from the Americans, and made bigger and better. It's not often you can say that. But what started as a small idea has grown and grown and grown for numerous different reasons and purposes.
Let's take you back about that moment when you decided to steal this. You went to the Warrior Games, didn't you, in 2013? And just take us through that. You saw what was happening and you thought, right, okay, there's something really special here. Tell us what was your thought process?
Well, the key to that, everybody in this room knows the reasons why, but it's sport. Sport was the magic that I witnessed. And having just come back from Afghanistan myself, seeing the wounded, injured, and sick, and seeing the effect this was having on all the families, and just the weight, the load on defense and on the individuals and on the rehabilitation programs, there just wasn't enough being done. And at the same time, not enough celebration and recognition of those sacrifices that were being made. So to be in Colorado Springs, Nick, where are you? Nick's here. Nick was instrumental in making that happen, as was Jamie LP, who's also in the room as well, which is it's just, again, epic to see so many people who've been on this journey for so long. But I was up in Colorado Springs, and I saw one of the things that really stands out for me was watching Ivan Castro on a bicycle. Ivan is completely blind. On a bicycle crossing the finish line to cheers from a few family members and about, I guess, 3 or 4 members of the media. By the way, he was on a tandem bicycle, just so we're all absolutely clear.
Do you know what? You had me there. No. Was it you talking to me?
Yeah, it was just you. And to see the smiles, to see the impact, to see the change and the effect that sport was having on these people's lives was quite literally transformative. And I actually just thought it was a real shame that it was tucked away here in Colorado Springs on an Air Force base for no one else to be able to witness and see. Firstly, for the families themselves, but also for the world's media, because, again, what I'd seen on the battlefield and what I was seeing now were role models. And I just really wanted to do everything that I could to be able to help create a larger platform for more individuals and to be able to really celebrate their stories.
I'll come back to you in a bit, because you've already talked about one of your highlights, but I'll let you think a bit about what are your highlights, and, you know, because I know you've seen let's talk now a little bit about the real impact of change it can have on individuals. And you must talk to people like, I'll go to Keith in a minute, I promise. You must have a real sense of that. People must come up to you with really serious stories that move you.
I think I'm not the only one. I think there's plenty of people in this room, again, everyone who's worked and continues to work for the foundation. Since 2014, I've had mums, I've had dads, I've had grandparents, I've had kids come up, hug my leg, and thank me and thank us at the foundation for bringing daddy back, for helping mummy out. Like, it's a real thing, and I think, you know, to everybody in this room, every single person in this room has been part of that. It's not one person, it's not a few people, it's everybody. And again, that community spirit has really just lifted everybody up. And it's been such a privilege and an honor to be connected to all these people who, you know, some are still wearing the uniform, some aren't, but the effect that you see it has on the family is quite addictive, to be honest.
And we're going to talk to a member of the family, one of the families later. So Keith, so you got that phone call. It's quite something, isn't it, to get a phone call from Prince Harry asking you to do something that is going to be a lot of organisation. How did you go about it, turning that into this vision that he had?
Well, first of all, I heard the story, but to be honest, I knew little about the armed forces. Like most people, they're tucked away somewhere, and certainly I'd never been exposed to the effects of that a lot of the people in this room will have seen close up. And I think the thing that frightened me most when Prince Harry told me about his vision was he wanted to pull it off in 10 months. And as I just spent the best part of 8 years organising the Olympic Games...
Well, you of anybody could do it.
Actually, the first thing I did, I was going on holiday the next day, so we had a cup of tea on a Thursday, and I went on holiday on the Friday. And I spent most of my bloody holiday on the telephone calling one or two people in this room because we had this idea, not much else, frankly. No, it wasn't called the Invictus Games then. We had no money, we had no people, we just had a very good idea. And actually what really did it for me, Prince Harry suggested, because I really didn't understand the impact of injuries in the way that he did, he took me down to Headley Court, if you remember. And he and I went to Headley Court, which is the recovery centre in the UK, for me to meet some of the guys that had come back from Afghan and from Iraq. And that was a profound time for me. I mean, that really...
That'll seal the deal.
He's a great salesman, you know. But actually, when we started, we needed to call in a lot of favours. And I remember suggesting that the thing we needed early on was to get the Olympic Park, because that's where all the facilities were. And that was controlled by Boris Johnson, our mayor at the time. And so the next cup of tea that Prince Harry organised was a cup of tea with Boris Johnson and myself and Prince Harry, and he twisted Boris Johnson's arm quite hard to allow us to use all the facilities in the Olympic Park at no cost, which was a great... This is the first part of the commercial plan, right, that we... But no, look, we called on a huge number of people who went way beyond what would normally be possible to pull off the first games, and none of us really knowing where the first games was going to take us. But it was phenomenally successful, and that's the reason we're all here today.
Tell me about the core values that you had then and are still valid now.
One of the early decisions we made in one of the first meetings we made was that these games should not just be about those that have served, but should be about their families. You know, those that have been injured or become sick or wounded, their families go through the trauma as much as they do, and they're going through the recovery in many cases in the same way as they are. And so from the very beginning, we built into our plan the fact that every competitor would be allowed to bring a couple of members of the family at no cost to them, because we thought that was such an important part. And actually, since that early decision, that part of what the Invictus family does has grown. The family has become increasingly important in the recovery, and we'll talk about this later today, about what happens after a games, and the family are there after the games, and supporting them is just as important.
Thank you. Ken Fisher, you're Chair and Chief Executive of the Fisher House Foundation, Chair Invictus Games Orlando 2016. Just tell us a little bit about the work that you've done with Invictus and why it's so important from your point of view.
Well, when I first got involved in the adaptive sporting concept, Fisher House had already been in existence for 25 years. So Fisher House at that point had realized the value of having families be part of the healing process. Our motto is, a family's love is the best medicine of all. When the concept of adaptive sports really took root, and we had the chance to get involved from a family and friends perspective, it was with the Warrior Games back in 2012, 2013. I remember going to Colorado. I remember meeting Duke and thinking that like the Warrior Games, were such a well-kept secret that these games needed to be televised. They needed to be out there. People needed to understand the impact not only of the families and the friends, but also what the adaptive sports has meant to men and women who had suffered wounds that would have been fatal in previous conflicts. Mm-hmm. The average stay, you know, was months, not weeks, not days. And so, you know, the concept of having adaptive sports as a goal, as a means for these wounded warriors to become competitors, was too compelling for us not to get involved in.
It's very interesting you're talking so much about family, all of you. Prince Harry, I've been watching it last night, Heart of Invictus again, on Netflix. And what's really key in that program, I want to talk to you about, is how much impact it's actually having, Invictus, on attitudes towards disability across different parts of the globe.
I can sit here and tell you what I think, but I think it would probably be better to speak to the very people themselves, because back in 2014, we talked about how I heard stories how individuals wearing shorts with a prosthetic or with two prosthetics, we were walking around London, and you would see the parents take their child across to the other side of the road. Or someone comes walking towards you and just looks as though they're struggling. Again, the kids and the other people cross the road to go in the opposite direction to them. And after 2014, it was incredible how quickly all that changed. And again, I only go off again what I see, but also what I hear from the individuals themselves. And it was a complete reverse. From mothers and their children were crossing the road to come over to shake their hands, to hear their stories. And I think the games itself really, rather than individuals feeling as though they needed to hide or needed to stay quiet, it was a case of, no, look, here I am, standing proud. Here I am, you know, finding my purpose again. And so many of these kids viewed then and still view now these individuals as superheroes. They really do, and I think that I think that should be encouraged. So, with regard to how each country has been affected or changed, or the perceptions have been changed through whether it's the documentary or through the games themselves, all I can say is that every single time, every single country we go to and that host the games, the impact, the positive impact on society as a whole is hugely positive.
So it has ripples beyond.
Well, yeah, I can use Germany as one example. Mm-hmm. One of the main reasons that we chose Germany was because we felt the need to be able to reconnect the German public with the service members. And for reasons that I don't need to necessarily go into detail here, but there was a huge divide. There was a huge gap of understanding. There was very little respect, very little admiration. There just wasn't that connection that I think we in the UK here and across the US that we take for granted. And now, just last week, they've announced that they now have implementing a Veterans Day. And that's off the back. I don't think we can fully take complete credit, but I have no doubt that Invictus Games and what happened, the magic that happened within that stadium in Düsseldorf, has a huge part to play there. And that will always be part of our global mission, which is going to these countries. And you know, there are other places. Denmark is another classic example where, you know, the media in that country has very much been in a habit of telling just the negative stories as opposed to the positive stories of those that have served. So I think, again, you provide this platform, whether it's on television, whether it's in the sporting grandstands, or whichever way you can. It's always about storytelling and giving these individuals the opportunity to tell their story, the true story, so that those perceptions of whatever people think they know is corrected.
So Keith, I want to ask you a little bit about after the games, because there's so much pressure, isn't there, and so much excitement and all the rest of it building towards something like the games. What about afterwards? Because I know this is something you're thinking ahead of, about that kind of post-games, post-competition downwards. You know, you might just feel, I've seen it myself with competitors with that, the slump afterwards. You're looking at that, aren't you? Yes,
I mean, I think the great concern in organising the Invictus Games was what happens afterwards. And I actually saw it a lot during my Olympic journey, that once a competition is over, and particularly when a sportsman has retired and they've focused their entire life on competing, and then suddenly they don't have that in front of them, some sort of really serious mental issues start kicking in. And I think we were very aware that we didn't want to leave those that competed and the families of those that competed without some support. And so Beyond the Games, which we started a few years ago, is now gathering momentum. Is going to be increasingly an important part of what the Invictus family does, not just organising a great competition, which is really has far-reaching, as you've just said. Many countries don't look after their veterans very well, honestly, and the Invictus Games has a great opportunity to change that in these countries. But just as importantly, we need to make sure that those that have competed are supported too, them and their families, once they've finished competing for the Invictus Games.
Ken Fisher, let's focus on families again from your point of view. How best can Invictus support families and their needs in the future? I mean, you do so much of that anyway, but what is your view?
Well, I think the groundwork that's laid at each and every games is something that we build on. And I think that, remembering that the families are an integral part of the healing process is the most important thing, I think, as it relates to families. At Fisher House, we've seen that value. We get involved so early on in the process that, we see a lot of frowns. We see a lot of uncertainty. We see a lot of sorrow. And yet when we go to the games, we see smiles. We see celebrations. We see the end, in so many cases, of a very, very long journey. And so having adaptive sports as a means to that end, and having the families be an integral part is so critical that you cannot put a premium on it. You just can't.
Right.
Can I just add to what Ken's saying, because it's so critical at that early stage for Fisher House to be able to provide the space for families to be there for the individual to heal while the family is healing as well. But I think in answer to your question as well, and building on what Ken was saying there, more than anything, it's just the acknowledgement. The acknowledgement and the understanding that the family, that once the individual signs up to serve, that the whole family is signing up to serve as well. And I think as collectively, again, this is preaching to the converted here, but as long as everybody around the world understands that, that to me is the biggest thing that we can do. Because yes, then comes the experiences, then comes the opportunities of which the Invictus Games Foundation isn't just about the games. It's about all the other days of the year that we have to, and we provide opportunities, adventure training, sporting activities, whatever it is, but experiences for the individual, but also for their families as well, so that they can do the things that they loved doing before, and actually proving that those things are still possible.
We're going to run out of time shortly, but I want to look ahead. So we're celebrating 10 years, and I'm going to ask you, Ken, first, just because you're furthest away. Looking to the next 10 years, what would you like most, what would you like to see happen?
Well, first, I'd like to not build another Fisher House, because it's not necessary. That's not realistic, because as long as there's people wearing the uniform, men and women wearing the uniform, there's always going to be a need. But I think as far as we're concerned, we would like to see the family and friends remain in the front and center, if you will. That the value that they bring to the healing process is not only told, but people need to understand exactly what that means. People hear the words, but too many people don't understand because they don't see it for themselves. I wish everybody can come to an Invictus Games and see the power of adaptive sporting, and to see the power that the family and friends have and what they bring to the table. The United States is the only nation, to my knowledge, that has a VA, a Veterans Administration. So it becomes even more critical, for other countries with wounded veterans to not only be able to take care of those men and women, but also take care of their families and acknowledge what their families have done, because, as the Duke said before, the entire family serves.
Thank you very much. Sir Keith Mills, your thoughts?
Well, actually, we were talking just before we came in here about the team and what the next 10 years looks like. And actually all the people in this room can contribute to shaping the next 10 years. But for sure, the problem that Prince Harry identified 10 years ago still exists, and conflict, sadly, around the world continues to grow, and who will know what's going to happen in Europe or elsewhere in the world over the next 10 years. But for sure, the way that we look after veterans, those that have served, and their families is going to be increasingly important. And I think the Invictus Games Foundation has an incredibly important part to play in providing the support that, frankly, in some countries, it just, it's not even on the radar. You know, if you go to many countries around the world, looking after those that have served their country just doesn't feature. If you get injured, then you're on your own. And that's something I think globally we'd like to change.
Mm-hmm. Prince Harry.
Look, I've said this over and over again over the years, every single time I've been asked a similar question, which is, how long does Invictus go on for? And the answer to that is, for as long as it's serving a purpose. I would love to, more than anything, and there'll be people in this room go, oh, what is he saying? But I would love more than anything to be able to put this in a box and put it on a shelf and let that box be covered in dust because we don't need it anymore. But as we all in this room understand, probably more so than most, that's just simply not the case. And I'm a big fan of trying to solve the root cause of a problem. That root cause of the problem is conflict, and I can't fix that. So we will always be here to be able to spread the message, tell the stories, change the perspectives, and help as many people as humanly possible. Because Invictus transcends borders, it transcends politics. It is what it is. There's this magic within this community that exists. So, you know, the next 10 years, I think there's going to be more people coming through. There's going to be more countries that are going to join, and then the other countries' numbers will probably reduce. Back in 2014, the Team UK and Team USA was up in the 130s. It's now sort of half that number. And, you know, we cap our competitors at 550 strong. If there are people in this room who want to really come in with a big number of funding, then we can probably increase that. But then that means that the games go beyond a week, and then everything else starts becoming much longer and bigger. But just building off, again, what Sir Keith just said, Nigeria is a classic example. A country that joined, the first African nation that joined us last year, had no form of sport rehabilitation really whatsoever until they saw Invictus and started building their own program. They've been in conflict for 15 years. But no one knows that. No one talks about that. They got thousands of wounded, and now and then also we're talking about Ukraine, and they've got hundreds of thousands of wounded, and the stigma on wounded in both those two countries is off the charts. And that to me is it's not just the conflict and the injuries. It's the recovery journey and what they're up against. They're up against it from a physical perspective, they're up against it from a mental perspective, but they're also up against it from a societal perspective. So whatever we can do within the foundation, building on what we've already created, but also relying on the very individuals that have healed themselves throughout this process. I just caught eye with JJ. JJ, in 2014, JJ was questioning whether he would come to the Invictus Games or not because he thought it might be an egg and spoon race. It wasn't, and I'm really glad that you joined us. And you won medals, which was great as well. But again, perception, perspective. We all in this room have a continued service to play. And I think that is what we're doing.
Nice to see you, JJ, by the way. We've worked together as well. And we're going to speak to Dean from Nigeria a little bit later. Is there anything you want to say something? Come on.
Just real quick. You know, in the United States, a couple of years ago, it was estimated that almost 20 to 22 servicemen and women were committing suicide every day. There was a stigma around psychological health that we have gone a long way towards eliminating. But forums like the Invictus Games, where people can see what is possible if they take that first step forward, becomes so critical. Not only for their health, but for their families' mental and psychological health as well. So that's not to be underestimated. So that's why the Invictus Games needs to continue. It's why what we do in this room needs to continue, because one service person who commits suicide is one service person too many.
Yeah. Thank you. We're going to come to the end, but I did ask for your highlight. Can you give us a little bit of your favourite sort of magic? You mentioned the magic, a magic moment that makes you smile.
It probably hasn't changed. Still, it has to be the beginning. 2014,
Yeah.
in the Copper Box. I was at the DJ decks, trying to choose some of the music and put the lights on and just get people on their feet. And is Guy in the house? Guy Monson, are you here? No? Well, we're having dinner at his place later, so he'll definitely be there. But Guy basically never left his seat at the Copper Box. He was there the whole time, up and down, doing Mexican waves. The whole thing was absolutely incredible. But it was that final game of USA versus UK, and it was just end to end. I think it was wheelchair rugby and wheelchair basketball. And that, to me, was the highlight, because you had 6,000 people who had filled this stadium and were on their feet, every age from 95 to 5, and people were just literally blown away by what they were watching. We had no idea what was going to happen.
I seem to remember you were sent to the sin bin, weren't you?
That was a separate game, but yes. Thank you. That was your highlight then.
Clearly.
But look, for us, I think all of us, including Keith, despite that call of bringing him out of retirement, I think we've just had a huge amount of fun. And I think I personally have learned so much from all the people that I've met, as the children, the family, the friends, and the individuals themselves. And the amount of respect and admiration that I have for all of them just continues to build just year after year after year. And now we have these Invictus 1 year to go events as well, because to be honest with you, we can't wait 2 years. So it's just like whoever's going to host the next games, we're all going to be there 1 year ahead, and then at the games themselves. So yeah, the highlight for me is being in this community with all these people. So Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to have to end it there. Thank you very much, my brilliant panel, the Duke of Sussex, Sir Keith Mills, Ken Fisher. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Thank you.